Hi, my name is Phoebe Netto, and I'm joined by our Head of People and Growth, Penelope Holloway, to discuss what's noteworthy in PR this week, which is cancer treatment. In particular, how three influential women have each spoken about their personal experience with cancer. We've had Princess Catherine, Sunrise presenter Edwina Bartholomew, and Elle Macpherson. And each of these prominent people have handled the conversation very differently. I would say two are unifying and one was very polarizing. And Penelope, who is affectionately known as Pen, was diagnosed with breast cancer in January this year. So in addition to being a brilliant PR leader, she brings the perspective of lived experience to this conversation.
Good morning. Thank you. Gosh, what a big lineup of ladies to be discussing this morning and having the chance to
You.
yeah, and me. So I feel very privileged. Thank you, Phoebe, for the opportunity. As you know, I don't often get in front of the camera, but I'm happy to for this opportunity. So thanks for instigating it and getting me out of my comfort zone to have this conversation this morning.
Thank you. I know it's it's had a lot of discussion, and so I think it's important that we talk about it in a really helpful way, and lived experience is important when you want to discuss something in a constructive way. So we've had these three different announcements. I'll give a short summary of each of them, and then we can chat about how well they handled it and some of the response and big reactions that each of them have received. So the first was Princess Catherine, and she announced her cancer diagnosis 6 months ago, but this week she shared a heartfelt video announcing that she has completed her chemotherapy treatment, and I'd say the responses had great support. Then Sunrise presenter Edwina Bartholomew, she's given a very carefully worded and emotional announcement on air about her recent cancer diagnosis, and overall viewers and the media have rallied around her and also cheered on her announcement. And then we have Elle Macpherson, who's promoting her newly released book, and the book included a small section about her cancer journey, which was a surprise to everyone that she even had cancer. And she talked about how she chose to not pursue traditional cancer treatments, and the reaction has been more of a pile-on than one of support. So wanted to discuss that with you and get your thoughts on that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so it was, I must admit, and I wanted to say up front, because a lot of my friends and even some of my family haven't known of my cancer diagnosis earlier this year, which happened, I think it was about the 2nd of January. So Christmas, New Year's holidays got suddenly very changed when I found a lump in my breast and was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple of days after that lump was discovered. But so I wanted to say up front, which I think is something that Elle probably didn't do well, that my prognosis is very, very positive. I elected to have chemotherapy after having my lump removed through a lumpectomy, and I'm just almost at the end of radiation. So if any of my friends and family are seeing this and hearing this news for the first time, my diagnosis is very good. Obviously, I need to stay vigilant and lots of checks continually post this treatment phase, but I have a very good outcome. So yeah, three very different responses to breast cancer recently, and I must admit I was caught off guard by Elle's news. I hadn't seen it myself, and thankfully one of my best mates thought to message me and say, "Have you seen the Elle news? I can't believe it!" And she was outraged for me, and I at that point I hadn't seen it and went looking, and then felt extremely outraged myself by it all. And then I think the next morning I was texting in bed with you at 5:30 in the morning, saying how angry I was about it all. And you said, "Why don't you get on camera and talk about it next week?" So yeah, I think the way I'm feeling is the way a lot of women with breast cancer diagnosis and treatment and those in recovery are probably feeling about the way Elle handled her news, and feeling a little bit vulnerable, sad, scared, and questioning a lot of things after her news came out. So It's
Yeah. Do you think a lot of the outrage is about the decision that she made because it was her personal health choice, or was it more around the way it was talked about?
I actually have talked to a lot of people about this. A lot of women who I know just I'm going for daily treatment at the moment, so get the chance to have a lot of conversations with other women in my situation. And I think the outrage was about how it was handled, not her choice. I think that's really important to know. One of my things that I discovered, having been diagnosed with breast cancer myself, and I thought I knew a lot about breast cancer. I've actually had the privilege of working on 4 or 5 breast cancer awareness campaigns as a PR professional. So I thought I knew a lot about breast cancer. I didn't. It wasn't until I was diagnosed that I discovered cancer is a very, very personal thing, and it's very individual. And every cancer is different for every person, and every cancer treatment option is different. It depends on your histology, your age, all these sort of things. The doctors look at before they'll even talk to you about what treatment options look like. So I think the fact that Elle's kind of hasn't acknowledged that, and hasn't acknowledged that there are options for women, and that it's a personal choice, and that not seeking treatment was her personal choice, was a very big missed opportunity. I actually have the same cancer pathology as Elle, the HR2, and I opted into chemotherapy after lots of discussions with my friends and family. And I must admit, sort of reading some of the news this week and last week, it sort of does make you question your diagnosis. And I just feel very nervous for the people out there who haven't got the diagnosis that I've got, and they've heard this message and must be perhaps questioning their choices as well, which I think is extremely reckless.
And one of the big criticisms that she's received was leaving out crucial parts of that story. She did go through a lumpectomy, so she did have major surgery, and I believe that cures or addresses that risk by about 95%, and then the rest of that risk that's not addressed is where the other treatments might come in, and that's what she opted out to do. But she didn't give that context at the time either, so that gap of information meant that everyone just focused on her choice to skip those other treatments. Do you think you need to share all those details though, or was the problem that she talked about some and not others, and it's sort of a all or nothing piece of communication?
Talking about Elle and her diagnosis is actually a little bit conflicting for me, because what I have felt is that, and what I've discussed with you this morning, is that cancer is so personal. Every person's journey is completely different. Every person's diagnosis is unique to them. And it is hard when you're first diagnosed, especially when you lose your hair, because it's hard to hide from the fact that you've got cancer when you've got no hair left and no eyebrows. And you find that every single person has a cancer story, and most of the time when you're already feeling vulnerable, that person's personal story is not helpful. And I think the missed opportunity here with Elle is that she has a personal story to tell, and she's 7 years post-diagnosis now, and it's been a positive outcome for her. So she has an incredibly powerful platform where she really could have helped in educating women on breast cancer, helped with the awareness, helped women understand their options. The fact that she chose that option, I think, is completely up to her, and I admire her for making that choice. But what she didn't recognize, I think, was that every person has the right to choose, and it felt very much like she was looking for headlines. I'm afraid to say, I don't want to be critical in this situation, but it felt like, she missed some of that important information. The fact that her prognosis was 95%, that she would have a good outcome of this cancer diagnosis. She missed some of those details, and I think instead she's looked for what's going to grab the headlines, what's going to get this story shared and discussed, what's going to help sell my product. I can't help but feel very critical of the way she's handled this, and it feels very much attached to a product to sell. I mean, in comparison, we talked about Edwina from Channel 7's news and how she handled that. It felt
she had a lot of detail.
And she shared it when she was still at a very vulnerable state. She's, I believe she's recently been diagnosed. Her emotions would be raw, but she's chosen to share that news with her followers and viewers at this point, which I think is really a point to recognize. And she's done it with vulnerability, and she's done it with care. And I think and it feels like there's no product to sell there.
Yes.
It feels very different to the way Elle's team and Elle has handled this.
Yeah, really good point about their motive, because Elle does have a book and she has a wellness product range as well, which fits the narrative of choosing alternative therapies. I think where she really crossed the line is when she didn't use neutral terms to talk about the options that she chose. She talked in a form of good and bad rather than personal choice. Whereas Edwina, when she talked about what treatment she was going to be going through and what the prognosis was, she spoke in neutral terms. The emotion came into the experience of being diagnosed and going through cancer rather than the treatments being chosen. And you're right, you've got to be so careful. You've got a responsibility when you're a person of influence that whatever you say then is influential.
Indeed. And I think, given I'm in communications and having thought about this a lot since the news, as I said, since my friend told me the news, I've been consumed by this since. But I think, when I think about working in the medical space in communications, working for some pharma companies like we have, and working on with influencers, medical products, medical treatments are held to very strict guidelines around what can and can't be said. Ethically, morally, it's very, very closely monitored, as it should be. What upsets me is that this person with this power and this incredible platform can go out and make these statements rather recklessly. And, I think the fact that I'm tapped into, and I play on the very peripheral of the Cancer Network with my diagnosis. I kind of got my diagnosis and then haven't really tapped into the cancer community for personal reasons. But after Elle's announcement, and I have now spent a bit of time in the community, the cancer community, and a lot of people are scared and vulnerable after this message has come out. The Breast Cancer Network Australia, I've been listening to their podcast that they have recorded specifically, that they shared with their network on Monday. They had a psychologist on board, Dr. Charlotte Totman, talking about the impact of this news on the network, on the Breast Cancer Network community, because there's a lot of people who have been left vulnerable, scared, anxious, questioning off the back of this. And it's just such a shame that she's had this impact when she has such an opportunity to share a uniting message.
Yeah. And I think the other point that you're making is just how heightened the emotion is around just even the word cancer to start with. So you're coming in from you've already got that context that you're speaking to, where you should expect there to be some sort of a reaction. And so you need to think about how it's going to be received, not just sharing your story. It's how will it be received by the people I'm speaking to about it. And they each bring their own contexts and lived experience to that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that the Breast Cancer Network, Dr. Charlotte Totman, who was on the Breast Cancer Network podcast spoke about was that's, you know, we're dealing in life and death here, black and white. It's life or death for some women with breast cancer diagnosis, and that therefore anxiety is extremely high when it comes to this kind of thing. And I think the psychologist talks about that quality information can reduce anxiety. And I don't think this has been quality information that's been shared. As I said, it feels rather reckless, and the impact of that recklessness could be significant, which is why we need to keep saying, as part of what we're doing here, that, you know, the most important thing for people to do is go and speak to their oncologist, to speak to their doctor, you know, listen to this. But then if you've got any concerns, if you're questioning your own treatment, the message should be speak to your oncologist about your options. And she missed that opportunity, I think.
Yeah, you can give your own personal experience, but you need to make sure that you're saying that it's your experience, not the right way to do it, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then looking at Princess Catherine, she had a lot of empathy and compassion in the way that she spoke, and really acknowledged the experiences of others while she was talking about her personal experience. I think that was the other big contrast, is when you're talking about your personal experience, even if you've been directly asked to talk about that topic, if you don't want judgment and criticism and shame to come in response, especially for such a loaded topic, you really need to add a filter of empathy to your comments. So acknowledging the experience of others while you're talking about your personal experience. And that could look like saying things like, I know that this isn't a choice that's available to some. Or I know, as Edwina said, some have had it much worse. Or what Elle could have said is, you know, I understand not everyone will feel comfortable with this path. And so that's distinguishing your comments as being only your personal experience, and that you also understand that that will be different to the experience of others. And that caveat just would have made such a big difference to how her personal choice was received by other people.
Absolutely. I think, you know, the content that Princess Kate has just been put out, and I've been actually compared to Princess Kate this year, which has been fabulous, and now to be compared to Elle, it's just making my really stroking my ego, because Princess Kate's diagnosis was around the same time as mine, actually, and it's been interesting seeing how she's managed her journey from a
and I know you had some strong opinions at the time too.
Yeah, yes. Just as a, you know, as a mother and as a communicator, just watching how she's managed it as we've gone on the journey together. My treatment's about to finish too, and hers has just finished. So it does feel quite similar year that we've had in a weird kind of way, if you can compare yourself to the
to a monarch.
Yeah. To a monarch, exactly. But I think, you know, Princess Kate's tried very hard to be relatable. And I think this throughout her cancer diagnosis and journey treatment. And I think this last piece of communication, she's done it extremely well, in that she's you know, it feels like she has been vulnerable. She has felt like she's tried to make her message accessible to everyone. And that she's been authentic. And I think that, you know, it's a very polished piece of content that she's produced by a very, you know, world-renowned producer, no doubt scripted, but I think, you know, it has been delivered with thought and care and consideration for others who might be on a similar journey.
And used it as a bit of a platform to talk about bigger topics too, rather than focusing on herself and how she's feeling. She's made it a lot more about others, and then some broader themes. And by making it about broader themes, it's very smart, because now she's not pigeonholed to that part of her life. She can still talk about other things and do it really seamlessly, whereas it's going to be really difficult for Elle to change the subject now and talk about other aspects. Certainly very difficult now to talk about wellness, because she's brought this topic out of nowhere. So people have been hit with it as a surprise, whereas with Edwina telling us early, Princess Catherine telling us early, we feel like we're there with them a little bit on the journey. And then to add to the surprise of the diagnosis and recovery for Elle, she's added on top of that the surprise of her choices. It's a little bit jarring. We don't really know how to come back from that and have her talk about anything else now. That's going to be hard for her to do.
Absolutely. And I think that's why people like us in the communications space, and maybe others out there, well, certainly the, the people that I've spoken to in my little network of knowing cancer patients, is the timing. It just feels that the timing was all around the attachment to the book and
Right.
the product. And it's strange that she'd choose, well, it's not strange. It seems obvious that she would choose this time to talk about cancer as she's got something to sell.
Mm.
I think we all are left feeling a bit angry about that, in the way it feels very much attached to
It's self-serving. Yeah.
self-serving
But even as comms professionals, when we're looking at how something should be announced, we make sure that it attaches to the broader themes that belong to that person's brand.
Mm.
And one of hers surely should be likability and relatability. And that, so it doesn't actually fit so well with her brand.
I think one of the things we talked about before this call was, what should Elle ask herself, or what should other people of influence who have this platform and have this opportunity to share a story, what should they ask themselves before that story is told? And I think there's three really simple things you can ask. Do I have the chance to help someone with my story? And that's very much sort of, I guess, my personal influence on that question. I'm all about supporting others, helping others, people pleaser that I am, but I would start with that myself. The
Especially if
second
you
one,
want to be an influential person in any field, that's a good question to ask with anything that you're putting out.
yeah, I certainly think so. And the second one would be, am I being authentic? I think when people aren't authentic to their message, they're authentic to the story, aren't authentic to the product, it's hard for people to believe that they're sincere without that authenticity. So that would be the second question I would ask. And then I think maybe this is very much attached to the story we're telling today, but the third should be, could my message cause harm? Because, as I said, I think this message could potentially cause harm if women and some men choose to go down Elle's path without educating themselves on their own options in relation to their cancer diagnosis.
Those are great questions. That's really helpful. We had a couple of questions sent in on LinkedIn, actually.
Well, don't tell me we're going to go off script and do a little hot Q&A. Let's see how we go with this.
Surprise. One question is, what are the PR implications of a woman sharing her health experiences in public? This can be a sensitive area, and often women are reluctant to share personal health information, as people can label them as weak or too emotional, for example. There seems to be a shift taking place here, though. I've got an opinion. Do you, Pen?
Oh, we might have to go to your opinion, because you know me, Phoebe. I am completely open to being vulnerable. I'm completely open to being my true, authentic self. And I don't think that women should shy away from that vulnerability and sharing their personal story like this if it's done in a safe way. But so yeah, what's your perspective on that?
Well, and I think the three questions you asked will help frame whether it's a wise thing to do too. If you can be vulnerable and it's being helpful and it's being authentic and it's not causing harm, then I think that will help in how it's received. I do think there's a bit of a shift. I was thinking if someone like Pete Evans would have made the comments. Remember the outrage around his baby formula recommendations and how they went against health advice, there was quite a lot of backlash toward him. So while there may be a gendered aspect, I do think that when it's something that people consider to be really important, like a serious health implication, that the reaction will be equal.
Yeah, you would like to think so. I can't quite distinguish between the difference in a male's health message versus a female's health message and why they should be treated differently. I guess again that's everyone's personal journey that they're on and their decision to make. But as you know, from the day I got diagnosed, I've been thinking about how do I use my platform, and my platform is very small. My platform, though, I think is my fact that I'm in communications and I'm a PR expert, and I've thought about how can I use that skill with this diagnosis to help others. And I think the difference that my approach has been to talk to the specialists that I've been seeing every day or every week or every month, talk to the patients that I get the chance to speak to, waiting for treatment, talk to friends and family, to try and work out, where's the gap in the information out there? Where could I help my personal story in sharing a message? And I've identified a couple of different ways that I want to use my skill to share my message. And I think that's perhaps where people could start, is just trying to understand, is there an opportunity for me to close a communication gap that's existing, or share a story that is not well known or could lead to a better outcome, and be really considered around that, and then obviously think about whether it's right for them or not, in the context of that. It's not right for me right now. That's why I'm not feeling very prepared for this conversation today, because you, as I said up front, you dragged me out from behind the scenes to have this conversation. It is something that I was willing to do at some point. I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to share my story and use my skills to advocate. But I will do that when I'm feeling a bit more energized and ready for it. But I think that's an opportunity for all women and men, regardless of gender. If you see the opportunity, share your story and hopefully affect some change for the good.
Very good. And then we've had a question around responsible role modeling. Princess Catherine doesn't miss a beat on this one. Elle Macpherson, question mark, question mark. I think we've sort of addressed that. Something I thought was interesting to think about was, are you required to share so much? One of the criticisms, Princess Catherine had a lot of criticism at the beginning for not giving much information, and she still hasn't given details of her personal health situation. All we know is that it was a type of cancer, and all we know is that she's undergone chemotherapy and I think surgery, but I don't know that we're ever going to hear more than that. But she's recovered with this latest video, because people feel a connection to her regardless, not knowing all the information, whereas Edwina shared everything and did so to be really helpful from a public health announcement perspective. I think it's more about what you were talking about with vulnerability and connection, more than needing to give details. But if you are giving details, make them responsible.
You don't have to, not every person of influence needs to share their story. It's almost, again, sort of, like I said, every person has a cancer story, especially when you're diagnosed. It can become quite overwhelming, the amount of information you received. It felt a little bit like when you're pregnant and everyone has an opinion on your pregnancy.
Right.
So again, going back to what the psychologist said on the video I was listening to, most important is quality information when people are feeling vulnerable and looking to understand what's happening with them. It's about the quality of information, but we know that personal stories have a big role to play as well. So I think, for us out there that are willing to share them, there is an opportunity to help others if we do it in a considered way.
And then last question, would you like Elle to apologise? I think
I
she
don't
should
think I
apologise.
do want Elle to apologise. Um, I think the opportunity actually for Elle right now is to go a bit quiet. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this as our still our head of issues and crisis, but I'll talk to it from a, what do I call myself here? I never know the
It's
terminology.
experience.
As someone who's had cancer this year, I'll give you my perspective on whether Elle should apologize. I don't think she should. I think what she should do now is give space to others. I think there's a role now for the experts to go out and correct some of the misinformation out there. I think there's a role for, like I said, for the Breast Cancer Network and others in that space to go out and educate their community on what's right for them. I think we need that quality information now to take over from the misinformation, or not the misinformation, from the
Noise, unhelpful noise.
from the noise, exactly. From the noise, quieten the noise. Let's get back to the quality. And again, I'll keep saying it, but remind everyone that if they're feeling vulnerable or questioning their own cancer treatment journey, it's all about speaking to your expert, speak to your oncologist. Don't go listening to influencers when it comes to making personal health choices.
Mm. And she has come out and tried to clarify her comments now in a subsequent interview on the Today Show. And she did say it's important to mention that I'm not giving advice to other people. I'm sharing my experience. It's what she should have said from the start.
Yes, absolutely. That's why we're all feeling a bit sad about this, because she could have made a lot of difference in a lot of people's lives by giving them hope. She has a good story. She's a great story. She had a lumpectomy. She's 7 years post-treatment. She's healthy, well, she looks fabulous. I still might buy her products. But so she did have a fantastic opportunity, a platform of power to make us all feel like good about our choices, but she missed that opportunity.
And well, I think it shows the impact of communication sometimes mattering more than the substance of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And again, going back to the sort of being tapped into that cancer patient space at the moment, the chatter out there amongst cancer patients, it's all about Elle. And isn't that sad that we're all talking about Elle and not talking about, positive role models? I think it's incredible to see the impact from a personal perspective on consumers out there, on in this instance, and patients out there, for someone like that to have a message and see the ripple on effect of that message amongst people. It's been quite incredible to observe it as part of that community.
Well, thank you for being part of the constructive conversation and bringing your vulnerability to it as well. You're walking this journey so beautifully.
Thank you.
In a way that's not all about you. And I think that's part of how the different responses have been received by people too. Is it all about the individual speaking, or have they considered others who have gone through similar or worse, and also just those who are observing and being impacted by listening to their story? They've thought about them as well as their own experience.
Absolutely. Thank you for the chance to share it. You definitely owe me a bottle of champagne. I don't know if that's a choice Elle would make either, but there again is where
I'll give
we're
you a green smoothie.
a green smoothie perhaps. No, thank you again for the opportunity this morning, Phoebe. I hope this is interesting to our network of followers out there, and we look forward to your feedback.
Thanks, Pen.